Congratulations to Shane and Tia. Now, of course, Tia is not the first Games athlete to ever announce a pregnancy, but has the arrival of a baby ever had such a big impact on a CrossFit Games season? Let's talk about Tia, or more accurately, Tia's absence from the 2023 CrossFit Games season. Now, I know that everybody's already talked about her pregnancy, and I'm quite late coming to the party, but I wanted to talk about 5 questions this raises for the 2023 season. So Tia's absence does raise a number of questions, and of course, I don't have all the answers, but let me know what you think or what you know in the comments. And let's jump straight in with the first and most obvious question. Who is going to win the 2023 CrossFit Games? Now, if I was a betting man, I would say Justin Medeiros, and then I'd remember we're talking about the women's field and say, I don't know. We have an incredible stable of female athletes that were really chasing Tia down last season. And on top of this, we saw athletes making incredibly smart decisions during the off-season, showing that they wanted to optimize that chance of making Tia really fight for the title if she wanted it again. So immediately I'm thinking about people like Hayley Adams and her focus on strength training during the off-season, or decisions people made to decline invitations like Mal O'Brien not going to the Rogue Invitational. And these are just a couple of examples. Let's not forget people like Laura Horvath, whose past performance really sets her up as a favourite to win this year. And we can think about the young ones that are coming up. Emma Lawson, her performance last year, how impressive that was. So while I don't know who will win, what we do know is that for the first time in 6 years, we're going to have a new CrossFit Games champion in the women's division. And a few other names that people might mention as possible podium spots or maybe winning the whole thing actually raise some other interesting questions. So let's move on to the second question. Does this affect the team competition? Now, Tia is not a team athlete, so why would this affect the team competition? Well, a number of things have shaken up the team competition this year. An obvious one would be Rich Froning not competing. For many, that will be a big obstacle now out of the way if they wanted to take a shot at trying to win the team competition. Add to that the change to the rule book that people no longer need to be living together and fulfilling these requirements in order to compete on a team together. As long as they do the open and quarterfinal workouts at the same affiliate, they're good to go. And that means people won't have necessarily been announcing as far in advance their decision to go team. There might not be as many disruptions to their life in order to compete on that team. So it could be that more people were planning to go team this year. For example, last year, Annie surprised people by making the decision to go team. Now, as far as I'm aware, she hasn't actually made an announcement as to whether she's going team or individual this year. Now, it may have been that she was thinking about doing team once again, knowing that Rich wasn't going to be an obstacle in her way. But now that Tia has announced that she will not be competing, would someone like Annie change their mind and decide to go individual? Are there perhaps other female athletes that feel like they have a shot at the podium with Tia not being there that had maybe decided they were going to go team this year and are now reassessing those decisions? Now, my third question is sort of related to another athlete whose name gets mentioned when we're talking about top contenders at the Games, and that would be Brooke Wells. And the question is actually, what's going to happen with Proven this year at the CrossFit Games? So Proven have always been an interesting training camp to me because they've of course had Tia there the whole time. So Tia was winning the Games before Proven was a thing. Now, of course, she was already training with Shane, so perhaps it is just a case of slapping on a name and a brand so that more people could be attracted to it. But we know there are a number of training camps or training programs competing at the Games, so when we want to compare them and see maybe which camps are the most dominant or which training programs people are choosing to follow, Proven have always had that ace in the hole with the fact that they've had the Games champ for the last couple of years. So how will Proven perform at the Games this year without Tia? Now, on the one hand, we might think, well, if Tia isn't training for the Games, is that time and energy that Shane can pour into Brooke Wells and getting her ready for the CrossFit Games? Of course, on the other hand, Shane does have to prepare himself for parenthood, and we know that that's pretty demanding. So it's not that he's suddenly going to have an abundance of free time. Add to that their move to Australia, how will that affect things? And speaking of Australia, that leads nicely into the fourth question that is regarding the Oceania region. And that question is, without Tia being there, will this affect the strength of field for Oceania? And this looked like a good chance for Australia to finally get more than 3 spots. And even with Tia gone, there is still a strong argument that Australia does need more than 3 spots at the Games. But the question is, if Tia is not registered and not competing this year, will her data still be added to the mix? So we know that this data they'll be collecting is going back 2 years, looking at Open, quarterfinals, semifinals, and games performances. And it's been indicated that your position at the CrossFit Games will be the most heavily weighted thing when making the calculation. So of course, for Tia, that is 2 CrossFit Games wins over the last 2 years. Now, while it's most likely that that data would still be added to the calculation, another question we could ask is, well, where does that data get put? Because 2 years ago, Tia actually qualified through the Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Challenge, or the MAC. So what will happen with those points? Where are they allocated? And that's an interesting question that we need an answer to, because we will have athletes that are not competing in their home regions. For example, someone like Jamie Simmons will probably not be competing out of Oceania. But again, one thing we do know is that with Tia not being there, we are still going to see some fantastic athletes coming out of that region. And can you imagine if they got 4 spots and we had 4 athletes, not including Tia, what an opportunity for them to demonstrate why they deserve more spots and more representation at the CrossFit Games. And now we move into my 5th question, or actually kind of little clump of questions. And that is linked to Tia's pregnancy itself. So I know people have been asking, was Tia pregnant at the Games? Is this why her retirement was so strange? And also another question could be, has this actually regained her some goodwill within the CrossFit community? So was Tia pregnant at the Games? Well, there's been a lot of speculation on that. Here's what you can do. Wait for her to have the baby and count back 9 months, and then you'll have your answer. Of course, there would still be the question of, did she know she was pregnant? And that's a little bit harder for you to answer. And then, has this affected her retirement? Well, maybe, maybe not. It's understandable that when someone is pregnant, particularly in the early stages, they don't want to speak about it because it doesn't always go the way they might hope, and they probably wouldn't want to be a talking point for an entire community of people that feel maybe they have a right to weigh in on such a personal matter. That being said, the decision to make videos saying that they were definitely coming back for 2023 could indicate maybe they didn't know at that stage, and so actually it hasn't had anything to do with her sort of will I won't I retirement. It could also be that even though she didn't know she was pregnant, she was actually feeling the effects of pregnancy, and maybe that's why she was a little bit yes or no with different competitions. And then I mentioned this idea of regaining some goodwill, and I think for the majority of the community nothing changed, but there were people that were not happy with the way she handled her retirement and what happened with Sean Woodland, and then things that have happened after that. But maybe now, knowing perhaps some of the reasons why things have been a little bit strange, they will push that all aside and jump straight back on the Tia train. I don't know. So there we have 5 interesting questions that Tia's pregnancy has raised for 2023. And why not? Let's throw in a bonus question. And that is, of course, will she be coming back in 2024? It would be the first time we would see a undefeated champion return. So that could make 2024 a really interesting year. But all that being said, 2023 is already looking like it's going to be a pretty exciting CrossFit Games season. And look out for a future video where I'm actually going to mention how all of this has an effect as well on the men's field. So make sure you're subscribed and you've hit the notification because you're not going to want to miss that one. There will now be new videos coming out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's the goal for 2023. Thank you for watching.